Okay, welcome Reichert and Gonzalez's class. You guys have just watched the first scene, or a couple of the first scenes from Othello. And now we're going to start to do some literary analysis based on some of the passages that were presented in those first couple of scenes. All right, what we're going to model for you here today is how to break down some of the things we're going to be looking for you to do when we're breaking down some of these text details. All right, when we look on here, we have some text details on the left-hand column, and then we have 4 specific things that we're going to be asking you to do on the right-hand side on the packet that you should have on your desk. Okay, one deals with context, which we all should know. Okay, but in case we don't remember, okay, context is where in the plot structure does this particular quote come from. Okay, then we have our topic or topics, okay, which are theme connected. Right, so we're going to be looking at which of these topics does this particular quote address, and a lot of them will address multiple topics. So list the ones that you think at best best fit. All right, and then we have our keywords. And this is where it's going to get a little bit difficult for some of you guys, but it's the challenge that we're asking you to take a step up with, and that is to look at the quote and pick a few words. We're going to say a minimum of 3. You might have more, but a minimum of 3 key words from the passage that you believe are significant to your understanding or interpretation of the piece, okay, of that particular passage. All right, and we're going to model this here in just a minute, so if that sounds a little bit odd, we'll kind of walk you through it here. All right, and then our last section is significance. All right, so after we pick those keywords, those 3 or more, okay, we're going to explain why those keywords are important to our understanding, our interpretation of the particular passage. Okay. So the first one we're looking at is a passage by Iago. Okay, in the text, it's lines 16 through 35. It states, "And in conclusion, non-suits, my mediators, for certes, he says, I have already chose my officer. And what was he? Forsooth, a great arithmetician? One Michael Cassio, a Florentine? A fellow almost damned in a fair wife, that never set a squadron in the field, nor division of a battle knows more than a spinster, unless the bookish Theric, wherein the taught consuls can propose as masterly as he, mere prattle without practice, is all his soldiership. But he, sir, had the election, and I, of whom his eyes had seen the proof at Rhodes, at Cyprus, and on other grounds, Christian and heathen, must be lead and calmed by debtors and creditors. This countercaster, he, in good time, must his lieutenant be, and I, God bless the mark, his moorship's ancient." Okay, so this is a pretty telling passage, and it's pretty wordy and a little bit dated. And so when we start to look at it, we might lose some of the significance of it. All right, context. What's going on in this particular scene? What's going on that's setting up this passage? What I have up here, it says, in this scene, Iago has learned that he has been passed over for a promotion. Okay, as a result, he's providing his rationale for why this was a foolish decision by the leader, which is Othello. Okay, the topics that are addressed here: trust and honesty, loyalty, betrayal, racism, revenge, and jealousy. Now, the reason we're selecting the topics here, guys, really serves a couple of purposes, but one is you're going to see how the keywords really start to tie into some of these as we start to look at them. Okay, when we look at keywords here, I'm not sure how well it shows on the screen, okay, but I went ahead and highlighted in red, okay, some of the words that I thought were fairly significant to interpreting this particular passage. Okay, one of the words was spinster, another one was bookish Theric, prattle, countercaster, and moorships. Okay, so now when we get to this next part, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Mr. Reichert. I'm going to go to the computer here and type in some of the things that he has to add.
So as Mr. Gonzalez was saying, the context, this is Iago complaining about, or explaining, or complaining, either way, about why he should have gotten the lieutenancy instead of Michael Cassio. Well, what I see is that at the beginning of this passage, Iago is talking about Michael Cassio. And even if I don't understand Shakespeare's language exactly, some of these words stand out to me. He calls him a spinster. Now, I happen to know that a spinster is a woman who has not been married, older, past that marrying age. There's a suggestion that she's probably, not the marryable type. So that word shows us how he feels about, how Iago feels about Cassio. He then goes on to call him a bookish theoric. Now again, these are not common words, but to call another soldier bookish is Iago's way of saying that Michael Cassio doesn't really understand war. He's only learned war and soldiering through school. And in that way, Shakespeare's using or forcing Iago to use these words as a slam on Michael Cassio. Iago then goes on to use the word mere prattle, wherein the toged counsels can purpose as masterly as he. Mere prattle. Again, prattle's not a word that we commonly use, but even in the sounding of that word, it sounds like meaningless, which is what prattle really ends up meaning.
Good.
Mere prattle without practice. He's merely speaking without having ever practiced. So he's saying that Cassio knows how to talk, although foolishly, about being a soldier, but has no real practice in doing it. At least that's one meaning that it could have. And as I'm saying these things, Mr. Gonzalez is writing them down, and we're going to ask you today to look at some other text details and try to focus on the word level of why Shakespeare chose the words that he chose to add the meaning to the text detail that he was seeking. Countercaster, the word down here. He says, by debtor and creditor this countercaster, he in good time must be his lieutenant be. He's talking here also, Iago is talking here also about Cassio, and calls him a countercaster. Now, I don't know exactly what that word means, but counter means against, and caster, so it's something about he's against Cassio. You don't need to know every single Shakespearean word to find deeper meaning in the text details. The last word that I'd like to focus on, and we have highlighted down here in the text detail, is moorship. And I, says Iago, and I, God bless the mark, his moorship's ancient. Now Iago's talking about Othello here. But notice that Shakespeare has Iago say moorship's ancient. He doesn't say the general's ancient. Because in this line, by choosing this word moorship, Shakespeare's showing that Iago does not like Othello, because he chooses a word that refers to Othello's race instead of his job as general. So I would argue that the word moorship shows that Iago not only hates Othello because he didn't give him the job, but he also hates him because of his race. So even though we might not see other racism in here, that one word that Shakespeare chose reveals Iago's racism. Now, what we're going to ask you to do later in class is we'll give you copies of these text details, and we will ask you to fill out these things for the text details. Context, topics, finding key words like Gonzalez and I did, and then jotting some notes about why you chose those words, what you think those words mean. Good luck with this. I think you can do it.